Hello and welcome to the Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong. I'm Alex.
I'm Julio, and thank you for listening. If you like what you hear, head over to Apple Podcasts to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. Help promote the algorithm and spread the word.
You can also find us on SoundCloud to subscribe and review. And don't forget to visit our main website, wearethecontrarians.com.
Follow us on Twitter at Contrarian Prime, and to like us on Facebook, visit facebook.com/Contrarian Prime.
And if you have the willpower to keep up with our pretentious ramblings, you can follow us individually at Contrarian Alex for myself and at Ovnio for Julio. That's OVNIO.
Now, time for the podcast. Alright, I'm recording for Contrarians Corner for Gettin Square.
Hello, and welcome back to the Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong. My name is Alex, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host and my buddy Julio. Julio, it's very fucking hot in Texas right now, and
you're telling me, man.
I was going to say, depending on what part of day you watch this movie, and it can just affect you and really annoy you way more, and it's not even the movie's fault, just the heat. It's that constant quote from King of the Hill where it might even be the first episode where Hank tells Dale it's 104 degrees, and if it gets 1 degree hotter, I'm going to kick your ass. So that's like, I'm avoiding really doing anything in public during the afternoon when it's like at its absolute peak hotness, because it's just everyone's just on edge and angry because they're so hot. And unlike the film we're here to discuss today, we live in Central Texas. There is not a beach around, a surfer's paradise to speak of.
No, you're just miserable between buildings. You're surrounded by concrete, and if you're in your car, then that's good. If you're at home, you're good. Unless it's, that really specific time of the year where fucking Greg Abbott wants you to bake yourself at home and prohibits you from turning the AC on. Fuck you, Greg Abbott. It's just
for real.
For all you Texans out there.
He's sitting there like Homer on the pool episode where he's just got a tent built around his open refrigerator and just sitting there with his feet propped up on his little thing of Jell-O. But anyway.
The point is, Australia doesn't know how good it has it.
I was about to say, we're not here to talk about Greg Abbott. We're here to put over Australia and their one contribution to the what kind of action suspense, almost like a heist film. It falls into that Ocean's Guy Ritchie type vein.
Caper. Is that a genre? The caper genre?
It is now. We should just start calling the charismatic enigma Sam Worthington the Caper. By the end of the Contrarians run, he will just have like a sustained 45 seconds of nicknames.
He was in Wrath of the Titans and is it Clash of the Titans? And yet
I don't know.
We've never even thought of calling him Sam the Titan Worthington.
The Titan Caper Sam Worthington, also known as the charismatic enigma. We are here today to discuss 2003's Gettin Square, directed by Jonathan Teplitsky and written by Chris Nist. These are, with the exception of Sam Worthington, these are all new faces to me. Julio, why don't you tell our listeners how it came to be that we landed on Gettin Square?
Oh, well, it's June. In June, it's Chaz Fisher month. Our patron. So Chaz, here's the thing, and I know I mentioned it before. So Gettin Square, he used it as a plug. He recommended it the first time he was a guest on the Contrarians, way back on the it's not Live Free and Die Hard. It's a Good Day to Die Hard episode. That was Chaz's plug, and we're like, oh, that sounds good. We should watch it someday. Of course, we forgot about it. It's in our defense, at least in mine, Alex. It's not like Gettin Square shows up on my Netflix landing page or like as a suggestion from Amazon Prime. So I guess Chaz got tired of waiting for us to watch it on our own. So instead, he became a patron, and now he's demanding. He's using his patron power to demand that we watch Gettin Square. He hit us with a 1-2 punch. It's like Gettin Square, and just for the patron exclusive feed, he did the latest Little Women. just for you, Alex. So
yeah, that one was a bit more
malicious
with malice. Yeah. But really, this worked out in our favor. We just put it off for so long that he ended up paying us to do it. So God bless.
The long con. 4 years
That's
later.
Right. My second note here, it says, LOL, Sam Worthington, thanks, Chaz. So I think he's already getting the reaction he may have been wanting from this. Yeah, because it came up, too, during our Terminator saga that we did, anthology, where we were just shitting on Sam Worthington, or I was, or something, and I feel like I remember him referencing this movie as something that he's good in. I may just kind of been conflating the two stories, but I seem to remember that happening.
Well, I'm sure it also came out during our American Hustle episode. I think that Chaz just brings it up any chance he can. It's like, no matter who you're talking about.
It's like me with Bachelorette. It's like, oh, are we talking about World War II movies? Well, mildly related. There's this romantic comedy. So today, 2003's Australia's Getting Square. Limited information on this one. Looks like its release date is just cited as 2003. My assumption is that this was just an Australian release that maybe got released in like 2 theaters over here. One of those really, really limited runs.
Or 2 theaters in Australia.
Yeah, it might even been a limited release by their continent standards. But again, directed by Jonathan Teplitsky. Just pulling up here his previous credentials. Looks like they're fairly... man has stayed busy since the year 2000, it looks like. And then Chris Neist also wrote a film by the name of Crooked Business in 2008. It looks like these are his only 2 feature-length films to his writing credit.
After that, he went and pulled off a real-life caper.
Yes, he's now serving 3 consecutive life sentences. The maximum security penitentiary. Julio, so like you said, it's not exactly, one of the Marvel movies or, something Meryl Streep's been in. So it's not something that we just have readily available access to. I'm going to guess you might have watched it the same way I did. I rented it, through YouTube.
I did Amazon Prime. It's
okay.
It's not like it wasn't hard to find, but it was also one of the things where like it was the only result. Because usually you start typing the title and you have a full screen of suggestions from Amazon Prime or whatever. But here,
yeah, those are the best.
Yeah, this is just like the one single title.
It's like
Gettin Square.
The algorithm and the autocomplete knows there's no way you could be confused, so they're just giving you the one result. There's not that. Did you mean good time? It's just no. We know what you're looking for here.
Say hi to Chaz.
Yeah, the YouTube version was a very nice film transfer, so good on him for it. Wherever that film resides, if there are any remaining copies of it. Looks like it was released on DVD in 2003, and yeah, no Blu-ray or Criterion to speak of.
Oh, I guess it's worth pointing out in case anybody's like double checking and triple checking our Rotten Tomatoes facts. This movie doesn't actually have a tomato meter score, which was a concern of Chaz's when he first brought it up. He's like, I wish I could tell you guys to do Gettin Square, so you lazy fucks finally watch it, but I can't because it doesn't have a tomato meter score. And I looked and I'm like, well, Chaz, it has an 87% audience score. We can roll with that. You're a patron. You're giving us money.
Yeah, well, we'll accept these asterisks with your entries when you're paying us to do it. So that's fine. So that kind of segues into any of our potential first-time listeners that are here wondering what the hell it is these two guys do on this podcast. Is this all they do is just make jokes back and forth and talk shit about Greg Abbott? Otherwise, I got other shit to do. Here on the Contrarians, we like to rage against the Rotten Tomatoes machine. That's our battle cry. We find a movie on Rotten Tomatoes that is highly rated, a lot of times known as certified fresh. Not being the case here with Gettin Square, but yeah, usually that beautiful intellectual property, that logo, certified fresh. And what we'll do is we'll kind of bring the movie down to size and make a case for why it's a little bit overrated. Maybe some of the things about it the critics were overstating, and just kind of bring a sense of balance to it. Conversely, we'll find a movie on Rotten Tomatoes that is rotten, lowly rated, typically about 30% and below. And what we'll do is we'll build that movie up and talk about why it is that we feel it's worth seeing, or what the critics overlooked about this movie, and really some of the underrated aspects, the positive merits of these movies that are viewed in a negative light due to the ominous green splotch. Julio, that comprises the first half of the podcast, known as Contrarians Corner. If listeners want to know how we really feel about the films that we're discussing, they just have to hang around to the second half.
That's correct. The second half of the show, the aptly titled Real Talk, that's when we tell you how we really feel. Sometimes it's similar to how we felt, how we pretended we felt during Contrarians Corner, and sometimes it's something completely different. And in the best case scenario, neither Alex or I know how the other one feels. If it's a movie like this one, like Gettin Square, where we've never seen it before, we've never talked about it before. So we're going into Real Talk as blind as you audience members are. I am looking forward to see how Alex feels about Gettin Square, because all I know is that he texted me a Guy Ritchie joke pretty early on when we were watching it separately. And well, I mean, I think that's just the beginning. From there, you can go in a positive way or a negative way. So very curious to see what happens during Real Talk. I do know, and Alex does know also, how Chaz feels, because I think that he pushed it so hard on us because he likes it a lot.
Yeah, it definitely seems to be one of his, I wouldn't say ones he's most passionate about, but I get where he's coming from. When you know about a movie that you really enjoy and think is like legitimately good, and it doesn't seem like a lot of people know about it, you definitely try to shoehorn it in when you can.
You try to go and get that contrarian seal of approval.
Yes, the big stamp. All right, so Gettin Square, again, released in 2003. No information on the budget of this bad boy. I mean, if they had waited, 7 years, I'm sure it would have quadrupled with Sam Worthington at the helm. It looks like it had a gross of a little under $3 million at the box office in Australia. So I can't imagine the budget being much higher than that, so I can't think that this would have been considered a flop or anything. Had a hell of a run with the Australian Film Award season in 2003. Australian Comedy Awards, Australian Film Institute, Film Critics Circle of Australia, the Hawaii International Film Festival of 2004. So obviously there was a lot of people besides Chaz that want to give this movie, or recognized that this movie deserved some accolades.
What do you call the Australian Oscars? Are those the mateys?
The mateys? Yeah, I don't know. The shoeies?
The Sheilas.
There you go. Andrew Dominic was approached to direct it.
I know him from something. Is that the assassination of Jesse James?
Jesse James. Mm-hmm. And also Killing Them Softly.
Yes.
He went on to just hang out with Brad Pitt a lot, so I think it worked out for the best for him. All right, Julio. You had mentioned there are not any official critic ratings on the Rotten Tomatoes page for Gettin Square, but it had, did you say, an 87% audience approval?
That's correct. 87%. Now, I could have gone and taken audience quotes from Rotten Tomatoes, but we usually fall back on Letterboxd whenever there's no critics quotes. So I did that. I went to Letterboxd. And it's not like there's a whole lot of reviews on Letterboxd either, but I found some that could help us out set the tone. So here's a few positive quotes about Gettin Square. We have Alex, not you, Alex, different Alex, who gave it 4 stars, 4 out of 5, and says, probably Sam Worthington's only good performance. Terrific ensemble cast keeps things light with the right hint of pathos. Budget crime caper that keeps you guessing until the end. Sam Worthington's only good performance? Come on, man.
What else has that fucker been in besides Avatar, the Titans movies, and Terminator?
Do you want more? Well, there's more Avatars coming up. And he was in that movie, the movie with Andrew Garfield, where he goes to war, but he doesn't want to shoot anybody.
There's something called Man on a Ledge that he was in. Something called Fractured.
Yeah.
Something called The Hunter's Prayer. Oh, Hacksaw Ridge. I still need to watch that movie.
Yes, that's really good. He's in it with Vince Vaughn. Like, they're both sort of, they're not cameos. But they're supporting roles. And when they showed up, because they showed up around the same time, I'm like, what? Really? He's gone through like, the superstar phase, and now he is on the kind of like Kevin Bacon did that, where he was huge for a little bit, where he was just like headlining movies, and then he pulled back and was like, I'm gonna do strong supporting roles, and now he's headlining movies again. So I think that we're heading towards some Worthington renaissance.
We can only hope.
Yeah, and then Alex from Letterboxd, we'll see what you have to say about his performances. Now, Star gives it 5 stars and says David Wenham steals every single scene he's in this hilarious Australian comedy. If you're wondering who that is, okay, well, just based on that sentence, Alex, do you know who David Wenham is?
Was he the guy that played Spit?
Yes. Because the next sentence says, from running down the middle of the street in his leopard print underpants and rubber thongs on his feet to coping badly with a court appearance. And then, it keeps going. But yeah. So I didn't think that this was an Australian comedy when I put it on. As it went on, I started laughing. But did you go into this expecting comedy from charismatic enigma Sam Worthington?
Not specifically. I just more thought it was going to be like an action movie. But then, I quickly learned it was, like I mentioned, the Ocean's movies, and take your pick of Guy Ritchie movies. It really seemed in line with those, so I figured out pretty quickly that I was in for a bucket of chuckles.
Or the Australian equivalent of a bucket.
Yeah.
And finally, how could we not close with this 5-star review from Chas Fisher himself, who says, it had been a long time since I had seen this and was worried it hadn't aged well. But no, it's still my all-time favorite Aussie movie. His all-time favorite Aussie movie, Alex. He likes it more than Babe. What else what other Australian heavy hitters do we have? Romeo and Juliet? Moulin Rouge? Australia?
Yeah, anything. Crocodile Dundee.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, Australia. Wolf Creek. You ever seen that?
Oh, yeah, the horror movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, none of those compare to Gettin Square if you talk to Chas.
God bless.
Hey, that can be his opinion, man.
So, being that this movie stands at 87% via the Rotten Tomatoes
popular vote.
Yeah. Be it that it may not be in line with what we typically shoot for, but the rating on Rotten Tomatoes for this movie is 87%. We still hold that in the fresh regard. So during Contrarians Corner, we will be pointing out the foibles and cutting this movie down to size, giving Sam Worthington the reality check he so desperately needs.
Not just Sam Worthington. Chas is in for a rude awakening as well.
And in the second portion, we'll get to how we really feel about it. So, as we do from time to time here on the Contrarians, we access the wonderful world of Wikipedia to look to the plot summations. And I thought the paragraph of this was a really good lead-in, as this movie, you got to keep up with it, or it can pull the rug out from under you, or just be like one of those things where the rug gets pulled and twisted around your feet, and you fall down and you're tangled up, and there's no hope. I literally had to go back and rewatch like 10 minutes of this movie because I didn't understand what was going on.
Bless your heart. That means that you're the one. I mean, not that you usually are anyway, but yeah, you're gonna be driving the plot engine on this one. I'm like, Australian owes Australian money. Australian betrays Australian. My notes are pretty confusing when it comes to plot.
Barry Worth, Sam Worthington, is a retired small-time criminal who is released on parole following the death of his mother so that he can care for his younger brother Joey, Luke Pegler. Worth was falsely convicted for murder by corrupt police detective Arnie DeVeers, David Field, who is in the employ of criminal kingpin Chica Martin, Gary Sweet. Shortly after Worth is released, a corrupt accountant is arrested and his record seized, causing difficulties for Worth's new employer, Darren Daba Barrington, Timothy Spall, an ex-criminal turned restaurateur whose money is seized along with that of Chica. Worth's friend is Johnny Spiteri, previously mentioned David Wenham, a heroin addict and small-time criminal, is arrested while conducting a drug deal and finds himself owing $20,000 to Chica. DeVeers continues to harass and threaten Worth, even as the latter finds success as a chef in Daba's restaurant. Despite his best efforts to remain clean, Worth finds himself under increasing pressure to return to his criminal ways to help both Daba and Spit. If it sounds mildly convoluted, it is even much more so
Yes.
than what I just read.
This is like Smoking Aces, but with Australian slang.
That's a kind of a perfect way of putting it. So then I guess Gary Sweet would be the Australian Jeremy Piven. He's got a more natural head of hair than Jeremy Piven does, so God bless. All right, so this movie starts off a la Reservoir Dogs, where we get kind of the aftermath of the events of the movie, because I believe the movie starts in the present, but then when the opening sequence wraps up, the opening credits, we get a really fancy title card with Gettin Square. We find out that was, we go back to 6 months earlier, where kind of we talked about earlier, we find out that Sam Worthington, Barry, is in prison for murder that he maintains he did not commit. And he's the cook there. My favorite thing about this is he's supposed to be this dynamite chef, and we really don't see him ever do anything.
He makes soup.
He makes soup in prison, and there's other shots of him. I don't know if it was he didn't feel comfortable holding a knife or cutting up food or whatever, but Sam Worthington, I guess he wanted more money in his contract to show him actually chopping up any food, but they hit you hard from the get-go that he's the guy we're going to like. And, it's up to you to make up your mind if he really did this or not, but he's a good guy. And I will give him credit for this. He looked the same here that he pretty much does in the last movie I saw him in, whenever that was. So the man has aged quite well. That Australian sun does the skin wonders.
He takes care of himself. He's mostly indoors, too. I think that's the secret.
He hasn't come out in a long time.
Yes. Oh, well, and also, Alex, when he comes out, he wears sunglasses, because he wears the sunglasses indoors. So, of course, he wears them outdoors as well.
Fucking
Isn't
dick.
that your big beef with him at the Oscars?
Dork.
My main thing at the beginning of this movie was just that, I know Sam Worthington, and of course I recognize his name. I don't even know if he's I guess he is first billed, but I just know it was like an avalanche of names that I had never seen before.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, so this movie is Sam Worthington and a bunch of Australian actors that were not in Avatar. And then at the very end, the end credit, Timothy Spall, which I don't know if you know him from anything, because you haven't seen the Harry Potter movies, so you don't know him as Peter Pettigrew. And then he's the Beetle in Sweeney Todd. And then he was Churchill. I don't know if you remember, but he was Churchill in The King's Speech. When you see this guy, I don't know if you recognize his name.
I guess I can kind of put the face to that now.
Yeah, but when you saw him before what I just told you, were you like, oh, it's that guy, that British guy, who's never he's always a supporting character.
I basically spent a lot of this movie trying to figure out who the European or American equivalents of these people would be, and just kind of kept finding myself coming up short.
Can't really.
I will say this, it's a compliment. Everyone is very unique looking.
Yeah. Do you think that Australian audiences feel that way about American movies?
Oh, it has to be. Not everyone is as overtly xenophobic as Americans are, but everyone has some of just the inherent, hey, they look a little bit different than I do. But yeah, I've talked about it on here before. I'm a Chris Lilly fan, so I've watched, at least to the extent of his television shows, some Australian television, and it's not, when I say unique looking, I mean everyone has a very good look for their character, and their stage presence is exactly what it needs to be. But I mean, it's, for as many movies as you and I watch, coming into one where I barely know anyone in it is honestly kind of refreshing. And then they all kind of start talking, and I'm like, hold on a minute, they don't talk like I talk.
What is this mate thing?
Oh, Julio. I think he says this in his first parole meeting, if not shortly after, talking to one of his buddies. I stopped counting after I got to I think 4 or 5, because I thought it was just going to be at the beginning they were going to say, I'm going to get square, yep, or I'm getting square. No, I just threw in the towel after a while on the counter. I mean, if this was a commentary track, we could have had a sound effect or a sound drop that we played every time they said get square or getting square. But they waste no time right at the gate, and it is the constant of the movie, besides Sam Worthington, is some character saying a combination of the words get and square, sometimes with an N on it.
Yeah, it's funny because leading up to this, we've had Chaz's pick for at least 2 weeks, and I could never remember the name of the movie, and you couldn't either. We kept asking each other.
Now we can't forget.
I will never forget, because that movie drilled the words "Gettin Square" into my head. And now I know what it means to, because going in, I didn't know what that meant. I mean, I'm assuming I do. It sounds like getting square means cleaning your act and getting on the straight and narrow. Whereas before, I would have guessed that getting square, to me, in American slang, getting square is just like evening things up. Like, you wrong me, and I'm going to get square and wrong you back. But that's not how they phrase it here.
Yeah, they just mean like get on the straight and narrow, get on the up and up here.
Yeah. They're much nicer in Australia.
Yeah, I mean, a large majority of English-speaking countries are much nicer than America.
Everything is so aggressive in American slang. Getting square? I'm going to fuck you up. In Australia, getting square? I'm going to behave.
As we mentioned, Barry's mother passes away, so he needs to go take care of his minor brother, Joey. He gets out. It's time for him to get square. Immediately, the crime life is pulling at him. We see before he officially leaves, this cop that we mentioned, this dirty cop, Arnie DeVeers, who's the guy that put him away for 8 years, comes in and, he's the one who tells him his mom died, and he's just an asshole. And I think he acknowledges that this means he knows he's going to get out now, so he's going to be watching him like a hawk to bring him back in. This is the bad guy of the movie, despite the fact that up until this point, we've thought this guy is a murderer in prison. The bad guy is the cop. And they spare no expense in making sure he's a dirty cop. He's got his faux leather jacket on and just like his whole stance and mannerisms.
And he tries to punctuate how horrible he is by spitting in the soup that Sam Worthington was cooking. And it's the most pathetic spitting action I've ever seen. He just kind of it's almost like it dribbles out of his mouth. It doesn't make crooked cops look good in Australia. If this was Alec Baldwin playing a crooked cop in America, he would just be hacking before he finally unloads on that soup. But here, this guy's like, it's pretty pathetic.
Who was the dirty cop on Batman, the animated series? Was it Flass?
No, Bullock.
Bullock, that's who it was. That whole aesthetic, that's been imprinted on me since I was a little kid. So that's to me, a dirty cop is always fat and constantly sweating and just angry all the time. So when you see someone like this just pulling up super greasy and just kind of just in a white trash hole ensemble, I need to work harder on understanding in my mind that not all crooked cops are just fat guys that look like Bullock. That's basically where I'm at.
Hashtag not all crooked cops. Some of us stay in shape.
So yeah, Barry gets out. He gets picked up by his brother, who's with some men from Chica Martin's entourage, which again is a crime lord that he had worked for previously, and he wants to make sure that his brother doesn't get tied up with them. He says, "I just want to get square again," and then the movie kind of splits. It's what would you say? There's 3 or 4 main stories in this movie.
No, Alex. There's one main story, and that's Timothy Spall's story. Everybody else is just kind of, well, we'll check in on them from time to time. But to me, especially the first half, it's so Timothy Spall heavy. What's his name? Bubba?
Darren? Daba,
right? Yeah, that guy. The restaurant owner. He takes over the movie, which is weird for somebody that's getting the "and" credit. I thought he was going to be on a couple scenes, set the story in motion, disappear. But he is all over getting square. He gets square constantly. To me, it's it's his story, and then everything else kind of happens in the background. Did you not have that feeling?
He's definitely the most captivating character in this movie, without question. Both the Daba character, but Timothy Spall, just looking pretty much like how I want to look in 10 or 15 years. Just overweight, but not morbidly obese, constantly wearing tracksuits or nice button-ups with a big fat gold chain over the top of it. I respect the aesthetic so very, very much.
Hot wife.
Yeah, yes, most importantly, a hot wife, and a restaurant in Australia called the Texas Rose. Maybe that's why Chaz likes this movie so much. There's the connective tissue between Texas and Australia.
There you go. Yeah, he looks great. But that's pretty much as far as his character goes. The only other personality trait that he has is that he's on Weight Watchers, or I guess the Australian version of Weight Watchers. Mm-hmm. That's not being on Weight Watchers is not a personality. That's just a little bit of something that adds up to personality, but it's like the screenwriter just stopped there. It's like, hey, we're going to get Timothy Spall to play him, and he's going to be obsessed with losing weight. That's it. Build me a story around that.
So the Darren Barrington Daba character owns this restaurant, the aforementioned Texas Rose, that is a real clunker. They just can't bring in business to save their lives. Meanwhile, there's an accountant, a crooked accountant, who gets caught by his wife, and he's banging his secretary. So she sells him out to the CIC, which is, I don't mean to speak for the regulatory agencies in Australia, but I got the idea that it was kind of a parallel of the CIA or something very similar, something tantamount to what we have as the CIA here.
It was more like the IRS. Maybe not, because they were dealing with, just money.
Yeah, but it was like money laundering and racketeering type shit.
You're right.
It wasn't just like they were trying to pull in, hey, the guy owes us $67 in taxes. Get his ass. So Darren's in the middle of selling his restaurant for a big business deal, and then all his money gets seized because of this. So he's just Munsoned out in the middle of Surfer's Paradise. Oh, trust me, it took me a while, too, to figure out, okay, how the fuck is this going to have anything to do with Sam Worthington, much less the beginning of the movie where some guy got shot in a failed heist.
Yeah, I have nothing against Timothy Spall, but I didn't sign up to watch a Timothy Spall movie when I started Gettin Square. I don't even know that he's in the poster. I went in expecting a Sam Worthington vehicle, and Sam Worthington kind of got written out of the movie at the beginning. And so, I was relieved when he came back, but it was just, I felt cheated. And that lasted through the entire, what is it, hour and 40 minutes, hour and 50 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So there was that. And then, for everything that didn't work in the movie, for me, I have to assume that part of it could be just kind of, not even getting lost in translation, because I understood it, but more as in like, it was tailored very specifically to Australian audiences. And so I wasn't vibing with that, I wonder, again, how do Australian audiences feel when they're watching American movies and it's just American slang? Does it not resonate with them the way that their slang doesn't resonate with me? Like, Spall is the worst, but pretty much everybody is just like, made this and made that, and the Sheilas, and the Coldies, and the G'day. And, it was just, it made me feel like, it's funny because, I'm original from Peru, but this movie made me feel like a foreigner. I was just like on the outside looking in.
There's a very fine line to walk in integrating, colloquialisms and local expressions into an action film like this, that obviously the god of this shit, Guy Ritchie, had mastered to the point of like, it feels fun and like you're learning something, to whereas here it's just like overwhelming. It's like, look, I understand. It's the joke from Futurama. The wrestler that's the big heel is the foreigner, and he just yells at the audience, I have my own customs, I ain't from here. And that's like, it got to a point in this movie where I was just like, all right, I know this isn't going to change. It made like, it was the classic, like I said, American xenophobia, where it's just like, why aren't they saying like, hang 10 or sit on it, or what's the haps? Nah, much more offensive was the next shot of Sam Worthington in a gym throwing some of the most ass punches I've ever seen. Like I said, I'm not fucking Francis Ngannou, I'm not Floyd Mayweather, but I know a good jab when I see one, and I know a good cross when I see one, and I also know someone who's actually never thrown a punch in his life, and that's Sam Worthington here. Chin straight up in the air, no tucking, doesn't roll the shoulder. I know Sam Worthington can't fight, so if he wants to prove me wrong, he can come find me. I'll cash in that Logan Paul money and make $20 million to fight Sam Worthington on pay-per-view. But he's in a gym, and we get the one female character of consequence here is introduced. Annie, played by Freya Stafford, who she's like not a parole officer, like a correctional officer. You work with minors or something.
Yes, correction officer. They actually call her that because she's monitoring his brother.
Correct. And they seem to know each other from a previous life.
Could you feel the absolute lack of sexual chemistry between them?
Dude, it's ridiculous.
She had more chemistry with the punching bag that was between them for a little while.
She had some good strikes. I could see that she had actually taken this seriously. So yeah, Daba's looking for money. He is also looking for Spit, our comedic relief character in this, due to some previous business dealings they have. David Wenham of Lord of the Rings fame. Do you know him from anything else?
I don't know him. I barely know him from Getting Square. So I don't know who he was in Lord of the Rings. And this might be my most controversial position about this movie, and that is that he got on my nerves from minute one. So that was rough, because I think that next to Timothy Spall, he gets the most attention in the runtime of this film. I just don't find him funny. And I know that, I just read those quotes, and he's certainly, the movie pitches him as, like you said, the comedic relief, but he's just over the top and really stupid and just annoying. So once we're done with this episode, first order of business is trying to forget about David Wenham. That's his name. Already started.
Yes.
Yeah, this guy, David Wenham, he's what happens when an Embry contender goes too far. Like they just let him run with it. And no, he needed to be reined in. A little bit of his shtick would have gone a long way. But here it's just overkill. It's always the same thing. He's just an idiot. That's the joke. He's always intoxicated, and he's just saying stupid things and not getting what's really going on. And I think that you can make a character like this work. You can make him be like endearing. And it's like, oh, well, he's kind of charming in his helplessness, his innocence, despite being sort of a crook. But for me, it wasn't working because he was just annoying. And so, I don't know, maybe it's just our sensibilities. Again, living in America, you just grow to be more jaded, and you're like, I can't really stand hanging out with this guy. But in Australia, they're more open-minded. They're like, oh, this poor guy. Come here. We'll feed you.
My next note here says, I too have seen Guy Ritchie movies.
Okay, at what point, Alex? At what point did you go, it's unavoidable? It stopped being the white elephant in the room, and it became the elephant that's stepping on everybody in the room. Like when it was just
definitely the introduction to no discredit of David Wenham, because he's a talented actor and he's got some pretty good moments in this movie. But the whole introduction of that character Spit, I was just like, all right, I get it. Brad Pitt and Snatch, that type of thing. I've seen it in the past, and I saw it in the future, and that was kind of just that's where my initial line was drawn. We get the job interview scene as Barry's looking to become a cook elsewhere. We get it. He is having a hard time getting a job because he's a convict.
It's illegal, though. Well, maybe not in Australia, but it's illegal to ask somebody why they were in jail, right? Like, fuck, I know. Yeah. I couldn't do that when I was doing job interviews.
Well, this guy, he might own his own place, so he can do whatever he wants. At one point, I got confused because it seems like Toplitsky had made a conscious effort to make the Annie character look like a different person in the gym scenes than like the real life interactions. I was like, wait. I had to stop. I was like, are there two girls now? Did I get confused and lose track of what was going on? Because I have a note here that says, who's the girl? Are there two girls? But his younger brother, Joey, is obviously falling down the rabbit hole. He's smoking pot and he's hanging out with the wrong crowd. And Barry's working hard to get a job so he can get him away from this. There's this shot of him coming out of like an interview that doesn't go well. Julio, do you know what I'm talking about? This, I paused the movie as there's this shot at like a burger shack that has a large Native American painted on the wall. And they sync this shot up to where Sam Worthington is, where his mark is, and they shoot it from the side like a profile to make it look like he's wearing the Indian headdress. My note says, what in the absolute fuck was that headdress shot? Can you provide me any reasoning or context as to what that was? Chaz, you too. You're on the line here.
Well, Avatar took forever to shoot, so maybe that was them acknowledging that Sam Worthington had been cast in a futuristic sci-fi remake of Dances with Wolves. It was just them kind of like, hey, if you know, you know.
I guess. I'm still baffled by it.
I just love that you stopped it. I as you described it, I remembered it, but I just plowed on. I was like, take
The
me to the
same
next set
just
piece.
bewilderment did not wash over you as it did with me.
Well, no, because I mean, I'll be honest, Alex. They kind of shot themselves in the foot with that beginning, with that opening sequence where they're like, it's a heist, and then what's his name, funny guy gets shot and everything. That movie, the movie that opening sells you, is not the movie that we ended up watching.
Mm-hmm.
We basically watched a prequel to that set piece, and that prequel was not a crime movie. The movie that we watched was just kind of like a comedy of situations where like people don't know how to handle their money. They get into financial shenanigans, and there's like court dates and investigations, but there's no violence, there's no guns. The confrontations are pretty tame, which is fine, but they don't open with this like major action set piece, because then that's what I was waiting for. I was like, all right, when does it start? When does it become an action movie? And it never happened. so yeah, I blew past the weird shot with the Sam Worthington's profile and the headdress and every other thing. I was, because in my mind I'm like, this doesn't matter because the movie hasn't started yet. And then at some point I was like, man, we have 40 minutes to go, and I guess I know where they're going now, but it was just too late by then.
We get more appearances from De Veers, the dirty cop. He's just kind of like a bad headache that just won't go away. He just keeps showing up. He's the cold that Barry can't shake. He's just there to constantly remind him, I'm going to get you.
He's COVID. It's here to stay.
He's here to stay. So David Wenham, Spiteri, meets up with Barry, and he's obviously a heroin addict, and it's to the point of being subtle enough to, if you're just watching his mannerisms, you get it to the point of like, it just gets more and more blatant until we get a shot of him shooting up to the point of it just being like, okay, we got this in the first 30 seconds, dude. Didn't have to beat us over the head with it. But he wants to get sober. He has these dreams of going to Israel, where there's a program there that can help him get cleaned up. He's going to do this one last job for Cheeky Martin to get the money he needs, get him clean with him, get him square, if you will. So yeah, we get like the friendship bonding. It's not even a montage. It's just a quick series of scenes that occupies maybe 3 or 4 minutes to show that they're friends. He knows that Spit has a bad reputation. He also explains to the Annie character that he's the guy that helped get me through prison, and he was a friend to me, and friendship is important, and he's someone that would die for me type thing. So we get the basic gist and the importance of their relationship.
You know who, like the good version, the properly executed version of the Spit character is Spud in Trainspotting. Which is funny because we just talked about that actor on the Snowpiercer episode. But he is kind of out of that group, he's kind of the loser, the really dorky, kind of helpless, member of the gang. But the difference is that Spud is charismatic enough, and he does enough other than being a goofball to really get you to care. So it's not just American cinema showing off. It's not just Guy Ritchie showing off, showing Australian cinema how to do it. Also, Danny Boyle, who I wouldn't pin Danny Boyle to any country. He's more of an international talent.
He's like Bono. He's just a citizen of the earth.
Yes.
Yeah, and the introduction to the Spit-Barry relationship is Barry could only find a job working at a gas station, and he kind of helps Spit rob the cash register. So we see that they know how to work together in these seedy situations. Fortunately, though, Barry gets a better job. He starts working at the Texas Rose, and this is where he begins his relationship with Daba. The
most unlikely team up you ever... I mean, it's a team up that I didn't know I wanted, and it's because I didn't want it. Timothy Spall and Sam Worthington, that doesn't, in my mind, doesn't sell tickets, doesn't really get you pumped to see what happens next. It's just... some combinations don't need to happen.
Daba is in need of assistance because, like we mentioned, his money's tied up. His business is going down, and then the kingpin of crime in the area, Chica Martin, came in and basically said, I want to go into business with you so I can use this place to wash my dirty money, in the vein of just talking about Ozark recently. And he turns him down and says no. So there's tensions building and bubbling under the surface. My next note here says, enough with the fucking flute. Did you have enough of the Calypso jazz interstitials in this movie?
Oh, yeah, no.
Basically, anytime something of significance would happen, it's like Ron Burgundy playing at the club in the first Anchorman.
My note says, do they not have cool music in Australia? because that's a key
They got
element.
Kylie Minogue, bitch.
Well, not available for independent Australian movies, apparently.
No.
They have one song, like one actual, like, oh, they must have paid good money to get this song in the movie, and that happens. They saved it for Sam Worthington's Oscar clip, but the rest is just kind of this thing that they did. It's like they put it together on GarageBand or something, and that doesn't work with the formula that they're trying to ape. Guy Ritchie, he's all about the needle drops, the crime caper kind of genre. It's all about placing the right song at the right time, and that just pushes through. So that's crazy because they seem to have paid so much attention to everything else that Guy Ritchie did, and somehow they completely forgot about the soundtrack.
So Spit is arrested by the cops in an attempted heroin drug deal, and he is brought in basically to be deposed of all the people of all the criminals that were tied up with this crooked accountant. They're bringing him in and having them, fess up for lessened sentences and whatnot. And so he's going to be like the big one because he was the one that transported $200,000 for Daba a couple years prior to the time in which this movie's set. So he gets arrested, brought in, kind of back and forth, the deposition scene mixed in with Barry explaining to his brother how he was set up by Chica and the De Veers, and how he's basically explained to him, this is why I don't want you to go anywhere near that. I didn't do this, and I had to do 8 years for it. And then the deposition scene, which goes on forever, basically ends with Spit not playing ball with the CIC and feigning ignorance to the entire situation. He pulls it off pretty convincingly as a heroin addict, but this gets him out for the time being. And then this is kind of where I lose sight of
the plot.
So,
dude, if I'd cared enough, this is where I would have drawn, just like on my notes, it would have been just the drawing of a guy with my hands up, just like, fuck it. I don't understand. It's just,
so
I mean, I don't know. Tell me what you think is happening.
Well, then, like, Spittoon gets, out on leave or whatever. And then the way I saw this is that because that money didn't get seized, maybe, whatever the case is now, Chica Martin wants Spit to pull off a bank robbery for him or something. He wants him to do his dirty work of some sort. What exactly is he wanting him to do?
Well, it's not that Chica Martin, because the cop, the dirty cop, is also part of it. And
yes.
Yeah, because the cop is the one that has information. He says he knows exactly when's the right time to hit this place, which is like I don't know, it seems like a mall or like some sort of big place that would have a lot of money. And I guess if Spit does that, then he can move on and finally get square. but
it's an attempted robbery orchestrated by De Veers and Chica Martin, and he tells he'll pay Spit, $20,000 or whatever it is up front, and then he needs 3 people and he'll pay them $10,000 each. Running concordantly with this, there's parts that make it seem like Barry is gonna bang Darren's wife, but that never really pays off with anything.
Yes. Dude, that's talk about a wasted opportunity. To me, this is the one moment in the movie where Sam Worthington shines, and it's of course the part of the movie that has nothing to do with anything else, which is just him being a chef that is cooking the kind of food that these Weight Watchers people are interested in. Like, it's delicious, but it's also low calories. Has zero, nothing to do with crime, with Chica, with drugs, anything. But it's there. It's in the movie. It's Worthington, like a chef, pretending to cook, and then the customers at the restaurant being very happy. It's just, I want to watch that movie. Make that movie. Sam Worthington, the chef, just cooking for the wives of ex-criminals who have gotten square.
Make that a reality show.
Yes.
Sam Worthington cooking for the wives of ex-criminals. That's all you need right there.
It doesn't have to be set in Australia. But maybe you can do it like, one season in Australia, one season in America. At one point you go
just like, back and forth.
Yeah. Throw some shrimp in the Barbie.
So this is where we get the Oscar clip of Sam Worthington just getting roughed up by that cop that has it out for him, but then he also goes to see Annie. My note says, what in The Departed? Because this plays off almost a mirror of what would happen in The Departed a few years after this, of the scene of Leonardo DiCaprio showing up at Vera Farmiga's apartment as Pink Floyd plays. It's actually, it kind of blew my mind watching it, I'm not going to lie. I was like, wait, what?
Well, Pink Floyd is not playing, though.
No, and I don't want to imply that Martin Scorsese has ever seen this film, but yeah, like I said, it kind of tripped me out for a minute. I had to like check myself and then check back what year this was made.
So this is, I'm glad that we agree that this is Worthington's Oscar clip, because it's mostly a silent performance, which might be why that enhances it, because he doesn't have to really touch dialogue. It's just him sitting in his car. He gets pulled over by the cops, and then, the cop steps out, smokes outside, makes him wait, and then we don't even see him get beaten up. We just see him show up, and he's all bloody at the apartment of the corrections officer. But, the entire time it's just that song playing, and Worthington doesn't say anything. But it's all in his facial expression, maybe his lack of facial expression, maybe it's just in the eyes. But it's like, all right, well, if you'd been this intense through the entire movie, maybe I would have enjoyed it more. Maybe you would have made more of an impression.
Yeah. I don't even know if I could say it's a flash of brilliance, but it's it's definitely the most impactful scene of the movie. I'm trying to look up the name of the song that was used in this.
If it's not a flash of brilliance, it's a whisper of brilliance.
Yeah, a stiff breeze of brilliance. Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, Into My Arms was the name of the song that was used during the scene. It's actually pretty good.
Nick Cave ain't no Pink Floyd, though.
Oh, very few people are. So, Spit smartens up Barry, wants him in on this heist. Barry smartens up Daba and says, this is how you're going to get your money back, and after you get it, you're going to sell me the Texas Rose. And then Daba takes this information to the CIC and sells it to them about this heist that's going down, and it's all building and crescendos in Barry and Spit outsmarting everyone in the situation, to where they go to this location and end up actually robbing the gentleman that, if you had blinked, you would have missed it earlier in the movie. The guy who is washing the cash for Chica Martin. And then they rob it and make it seem like De Vere's had something to do with it. And then they just kind of get away with it, and Spit disappears.
Yeah, it's even more convoluted than it sounds. And you know why? Because
I'm trying to make our listeners not go cross-eyed just from the dialogue here of us trying to explain this movie. I mean, you can check it out for yourself. It's an easy watch and being 100 minutes long, but this, like I told Julio just a few minutes ago in here, I had to back it up to make sure I understood the end of this movie, because I was just like, hold on, I'm lost.
Well, the problem is that they try to fool the audience. It's not enough that Sam Worthington and Spit are pulling a fast one on the crooked cop and the mob boss, right? It's just that on top of that, they want us, the audience, to believe that Sam Worthington is also double-crossing Spit, which it's impossible. Like, they haven't set things up enough for us to believe that. Sam Worthington has been an angel the entire movie. So the way that this plays out is that in the middle of this heist, Sam Worthington shoots Spit, and then he brings him to the van, and he's like, oh, he lies, and he says that he got shot by someone else that was defending the safe. The other two guys bolt, and then once they're alone, Spit opens his eyes, and he's like, oh no, just kidding, he was not dead. Well, you know what? I never thought that he was dead. I never thought that Worthington had betrayed him. But you just wasted a lot of time, and you just made things a lot more complicated by trying to confuse me. I think that the movie would have been more pleasant to watch and much more if it just been more straightforward. Just let us into the plan from the beginning, and then we don't have to worry about trying to figure out. Because what I thought, because they're all wearing masks, I thought that maybe, like, I didn't know who had shot him. I was like, I thought it was supposed to be Sam Worthington, but since he's wearing a mask and there's no way that Sam Worthington would have shot him, then it was maybe one of the other two guys. And just what you're doing is you're fucking with your audience when you shouldn't. At this point, we should just be all on the same page and just enjoying the fact that these guys are finally getting the revenge. But instead, we're trying to figure out what's happening.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, too. It's clearly the tension here is it's supposed to be the payoff of we've only heard how good Sam Worthington, the Barry character, was as a criminal, and here's where he takes over and he, is a real badass all of a sudden. But like you said, the whole movie existed up until this point to just chop his balls off and make him seem like this guy who just exists to please housewives with his salads that he makes. And then here it's like, oh no, remember, he's a badass now. It's a shift in tone to the point of almost just like, I couldn't help but just kind of laugh at him. Everyone get on the fucking floor. And, Sam Worthington trying to be a badass.
Yeah, he's not even, like, he's certainly not De Niro in Heat. He's definitely not Val Kilmer. I don't think he's even Tom Sizemore in Heat. He would be, I don't know, what shitty bank robbing movies do we have over here in America?
What's that shitty one with Bruce Willis? Is it Last Man Standing?
There's one called Bandits with Bilbo Thornton.
Yeah, Bruce Willis in Last Man Standing, directed by Walter Hill, starring Bruce Willis, Christopher Walken, and Bruce Dern. He's not even Bruce Dern in Last Man Standing.
He's not even Mr. Brown in Reservoir Dogs.
No. Yeah, so they just kind of get away with it. And then, because Spit is a wanted person and they help fake his death, he's got to get gone, though. So Barry takes over the restaurant where Joey works there now. Presumably everything's fine with Annie because they're dating. And the cop goes away because he sets up a scenario in which it makes it look like he did it, tied in with Chica Martin. And so right before they're both apprehended by authorities, they think that each other's to blame for something, so there's going to be the bad blood there. So everything plays off as it should, I guess, in this happy ending of a movie.
Look, if you're listening to this episode and you haven't watched the movie, just rest assured, the good guys win, bad guys lose. 0 casualties.
And then I swear to God, the last thing that happens in the movie is Daba and Barry get a postcard. It's not marked, but it's from Spit, and it says "Got Square" or "I'm Square," something like that.
Yeah, and then kind of in a very symbolic gesture that represents how I feel about David Denham's performance, Sam Worthington burns the postcard, and then we hit credits.
And then Someday by Sugar Ray starts playing, or the Australian Sugar Ray cover band starts playing Someday.
It's the Nick Cave cover of Someday.
There you go. Anyway, that was Gettin Square, and I definitely feel that we got square by the end of that movie. And now I need to get square with Chaz for making me watch this.
All right, let's go to Real Talk.
Excuse me, who's paying for my bus fare today?
I'm sure someone will sort that out.
Yeah, well, who, mate? I'm on a pension, I haven't got no money.
Well, we'll come to that later.
I see, there you go. That's the same sort of shit them coppers were on about, trying to get me to say things that I'm supposed to have I know nothing about. You're full of shit, mate, dead set.
Well...
Yeah, dead set trying to verbal me. You're trying to put words into my mouth and that.
No, no one is trying to put words into your mouth.
Yes, you are.
No, we're not.
Yes, you are. You're doing it now.
Doing what, Mr. Spiteri?
Well, what do you think, mate? Trying to get me to say things you want to hear. Mate, I already told you I don't know nothing about that shit.
Yes, well...
Oh. I'm sorry, Your Honor. I didn't mean to say shit. It's just that this fucking guy's getting to me. He's trying to put words into my mouth and that. Look, I'm not smart or nothing. I only went to junior at school.
And we are back. But before we get into Real Talk, it's time for PP, our patron pitch. This is where we tell patrons what they can look forward to on our patron feed, and non-patrons get to listen to what they're missing out on for not being patrons. So we're going to have, of course, as usual, our deleted clips, just audio that didn't make it into the episode. And also by now, that patron feed should have our exclusive episode on Little Women 2019 edition. As we mentioned before, that was another Chaz demand. That's just... we said malicious, and there's really no other way to look at it. And then we have, of course, After Hours, which is the patron-exclusive segment where Alex and I share with you other things that we watched, other things that we read, other things that we played. Sometimes they're recommendations, sometimes they're not. Alex, what are you bringing to Contrarians After Hours this time?
Friend of the podcast, Gerald, had me on 2 Peas on a Pod, and I'm very thankful for that. I had a good time with it. And we discussed our top 5 I call them sex comedies. Some people call them raunchy comedies, what have you. And from that discussion, Kingpin made my list. And when we were done recording, I was just basically reflecting on how great that movie is. And it's free on YouTube, so I ended up just watching it last night after he and I recorded. And I want to talk about why that movie's so good and very underrated, and I feel like almost sometimes gets lost in the shuffle in the great 90s comedies. And we're going to talk about the movie Peter Farrelly should have won an Oscar for, Kingpin.
It was his honorary. It says Green Book, but we already know that. Reading between the lines.
It's the Scorsese Departed one. We know what it's really for.
Yep. Well, on my end, Alex, have you seen Footloose, the Kevin Bacon movie?
Yeah, but I couldn't recount much of any dialogue or anything. It's one of those I've seen on TV and probably at a party 3 or 4 times.
So that means that more than likely you haven't seen the 2011 Footloose remake, reimagining with Dennis Quaid, Miles Teller.
Miles Teller's the dude in it?
Miles Teller is the friend. He plays a Chris Penn role.
I was still working at the theater when it came out.
Me too. Well, I mean, yeah, obviously. Well, I will tell you about it. It's not a movie that I would say everybody needs to go out and see, but it's definitely a movie worth talking about, especially, if you're familiar with Footloose, which I am. So I'm going to be telling you about Footloose, and then I watched this right before watching Gettin Square, which might have affected my state of mind while I watched Gettin Square. And this is Danny Boyle's Trans. That might have also come out while you were still working at the theater. It's James McAvoy, Rosario Dawson, the French guy from Black Swan.
I guess maybe.
All right, we'll see if I can refresh your memory. So, Contrarians After Hours is going to be Kingpin, the 2011 Footloose, and Danny Boyle's Trans. What a lineup! And also, we'll have our pre-recording notes. Just a lot of cool stuff for patrons everywhere. And, by the way, before I forget, we have a new patron, Sam Hurley from Movie Reviews in 20 Qs, just joined the Contrarian Supplements. Yeah. You can be like him. Just go to patreon.com/Contrarian Prime, look at our tiers, see if any of those look interesting enough for you to join and contribute.
For the price of a Gatorade for some Starburst. I mean, you can't even go and get a bag of Takis or fucking Flamin' Hot Cheetos anymore for less than $1. So skip that snack and throw $1 our way. You get a bunch of really cool, nifty extras and get to listen to some of our more unfiltered discussions, some of our more unabashed reviews of movies, such as Bachelorette and what's the pedophile movie you made me watch?
Beautiful Girls.
Beautiful Girls, yes.
And by now you'll also get to listen to Alex suffering through yet another version of Little Women, something which he said he wouldn't do ever again.
I'm not excited about this. Hopefully you can't access that yet. I'm going to try to push that off as far as I can, but we'll see how that goes. Yeah. Scrounge up some change out of the cup holder in your car, throw it our way. If you want to throw us a few extra bucks, you can get us to fully dive deep into a film of your choosing. We thank and love all of our wonderful patrons, and we are accepting applications on a daily basis. So patreon.com/Contrarian Prime. Head on over. Check it out.
And now, an HBO feature presentation. The Contrarians' real talk discussion of Gettin Square.
Yeah, the Saturday afternoon matinee film that we watched. Just recapping general shit here. It was released in 2003, again directed by Jonathan Teplitsky, written by Christopher Neist. I'm just going to settle on that. His last name spelled Nyst. Made a little under $3 million at the Australian box office. If you want to know the awards it racked up, be sure to head over to its Wikipedia page. But again, Australian Comedy Awards, Australian Film Institute, Film Critics Circle of Australia, the Hawaiian International Film Festival, the IF Awards. It certainly carved out its niche and its part of the globe, and in many ways set the table for what was to come over the next 10 years, and that is trying to make Sam Worthington a thing.
This movie started it. This movie is to blame.
When we were on live stream for The Cure, for anyone that listened to that, recap real quick, Julio, you'll recall that one of our questions we threw to the audience was, have you ever taken Mark Wahlberg seriously in anything? And we talked about how Mark Wahlberg is like, to some people, he's just Mark Wahlberg with a different, outfit on in different movies, and he's all the same and shit. And my defense is always, The Departed's great, and Pain and Gain, fucking love him in that. This movie, more than anything, defines my issue with Sam Worthington, and I just do not believe a fucking thing that guy does. It's like almost to the point where everything I've watched him in, I'm like, he doesn't want to be there, and it's not even he's so good that can mask it. It's just his general disdain for his fellow man just permeates through the screen, and his desire to not really want to interact with other people, which I can sympathize with. I really am not a people person at all and don't really like mingling with others. My chosen profession also isn't acting. So
what you're saying is if you were an actor, though, you would be like Sam Worthington.
No, if I was an actor, I would try to be the most beloved. I would be Roberto Benigni. Everyone would be insane about me. Say I'm the nicest guy in the world. Anyway, definitely jumping in. Were you able to find any negative reviews on any of the Letterboxd, the follow-up for this movie, or even some of the audience reviews on Rotten Tomatoes?
Some. Here's the problem with the negative reviews on Letterboxd. They're not particularly constructive. Like, there's this 1 star from Bar Brady, which just says, typical Australian garbage, terrible writing and overacting. Okay. That seems like a negative overreaction.
Yeah.
But I found some that were, kind of like 3 stars, like positive, but they had like some interesting things to say. So let's go with that. Bistro Mash from Letterboxd. It's like a Guy Ritchie film set in Australia. No shit. That's the entirety of the review. Which I guess
we'll get to it, but like that's I'm gonna be, in Chaz's eyes, be wrong and cruel about this movie, but right off the bat, that is it, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Having a movie like this, it's like the local band that gets a hit type thing. I completely understand why Chaz would like this and get excited about this movie and view it as like not only a hidden gem of like a cool crime thriller action movie, but also something that can instill national pride and things like that. So at the same time, that review is exactly it. It's just the text I sent you earlier, watches one Guy Ritchie movie.
I would say watches maybe 3 or 4 before he married Madonna.
Yeah.
He missed that part of the career. Okay, how about 2 stars from Adam? And says, maybe the humor is lost in translation because none of this plays like comedy to me. David Wenham seems to be incessantly, ineffectively mugging for laughs, while Sam Worthington barely registers on camera. There's not much any performer could do with such a lame script, which is obsessed with half-baked plot turns and the phrase "Gettin Square." I picked it because it's mostly accurate, although way too mean-spirited. Like I would make the same points, and I will make the same points, but this guy sounds like he had a really bad time, and I was just like, okay, it's not funny. Some of it was funny. Okay, but now here's the centerpiece. This is from Mel Killingsworth, who is a screenwriter who's been on Chaz and Stu's podcast, Draft Zero, where they talk about screenwriting, where they just analyze things way more, they're like purely about craft. They're not just making jokes and being silly like we are. And Mel's been on their show a few times, and I respect her opinion the same way that I respect Chaz's and Stu's. I probably respect hers more than Chaz's because I haven't heard her say anything good about American Hustle yet. She's pretty smart, and so she didn't give Gettin Square a star rating. She never does on Letterboxd. But her review is pretty short, but I think it gets to the bottom of it somewhat, or at least I think it provides like because she lives in Australia, so I think it provides like that Australian point of view that we might be missing, seeing that we both live here in Texas, the United States of Texas. So she says, the question is noir or nah? The tone and genre of right? The tone and genre of this film is a bit hard to pin down, which just makes one frustrated Australia isn't turning out more heist comedy neo-noir which play with structure and transitions and take their time with dialogue exchanges outside of prisons, in heavy bag rooms, or on laden dinner tables in criminal fronts. Verdict: an Aussie noir. The main story is Gold Coast neo-noir. Like its compatriots, it favors hinting at evil deeds than lingering on the explicit depictions thereof. Back alley, in this case kitchen deals, and mistrust of authority except for that one good cop who is usually at odds with the system, at least somewhat. Its setting requires it to trade fedoras for thongs and rain-soaked for sun-soaked. Its addicts are more into windbreakers than soiled white button-ups, and the dialogue is more "what are you on about, mate?" than "you know how to whistle, don't you, Steve?" But its angles and blocking are noir to their core. That story is intersped with long segments which are basically Abbott and Costello down under. David Wenham has never been better. Like Aussie classic The Castle, this might be a weird one for other countries to grasp in that while the humor comes from several somewhat over-the-top characters, it's not caricaturing them without a genuine affection for them. And I am fully prepared to admit that the reason this movie didn't really work for me, certainly didn't work the way it seems to work for Mel and for Chaz and for all those other people that gave it 4 and 5 stars, is that I don't live in Australia. And there's like a little bit of the charm. I don't know, and I really want to talk about this. Just like the experience of watching something that was made, so to speak, in your backyard. Because I found that to work for the movie and to work against the movie. What's your experience with that? And how do you think that it affects you in this specific scenario? Like, you know, do you feel like you were missing out on something because this was a movie made in Australia and you don't live in Australia?
Not entirely. There's really no way for me to not sound like a fucking asshole about this. Of just like... I've seen this movie before, but done better. But then when I try to like qualify or validate Chaz's adoration for it because he's getting an Australian version of that, to me that makes me sound like an asshole. It makes me seem like
No. I mean, I agree because that's how I felt too. I was like, man, how can I express how I feel about this movie without sounding condescending? Right?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I get it. You like it because you're Australian, and well, you poor Australian guy. We get them all the time here in the States, but that's not quite it. I mean, I think that.
No.
You just said it, right? We've seen this movie many times before, but to be fair, we haven't seen it in Australia. Like, we haven't seen it set in Australia. Like, is that enough to make it stand apart and you know, be distinctively good? I don't think so. But I think that maybe it does if you live in Australia. We were watching, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and you're like, oh man, I've been in that, you know, barbecue place. So I imagine something like that happens if you're an Australian in this movie that is a pretty, I would say, you know, like solid facsimile of you know, a Guy Ritchie movie or the kind of crime heist movie. It just came out of your country, and it's made with actors that, you know, I mean, I imagine there's a good chance that most of the actors that we don't know here are somewhat familiar for people that live in Australia. Maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you know, I don't know. I can't judge how Australian it looks. Like, we make jokes when we did Jason Takes Manhattan. We're like, oh, that's, you know, New York by way of Vancouver or whatever. But in this case, it's like, I imagine it's Australia by way of Australia, but are they picking like the super Australian thing, or is it just the way that people talk? I don't know. I am sure we're going to get a response from Chaz after this episode, setting us straight, or at least clarifying, you know.
He's going to get square with us.
The American version of Getting Square. I guess we can circle back to the Australian experience and the international experience. But I guess to get back to what you were saying earlier, the Sam Worthington phenomenon, I think I'm with you in this case. Like, I famously have defended him in previous conversations we've had. Like,
he sucks.
So do you feel he sucks just because there's nothing going on like behind the eyes?
It's just like, what did we watch recently that was similar to this? I'm trying to remember. We didn't. I'm sorry, Julio. I was thinking of The Town because I was thinking of a movie I watched recently where someone was trying to get out of the crime life, but it kept pulling them back in. And it's kind of unfair to compare those two movies because apples and oranges. But it's just like, he just sucks. Like, he's one of those, he's a fraud. He's like Eddie Redmayne, this like borderline crime perpetrated on the movie-going public. And that also, I need to find an American that I could put that onus on too. I know Reed always was Justin Long was one he referenced as like a fraud
So
that was
weird.
like but like I think Justin Long's great. I like Going the Distance a lot. But those actors, we always talked famously about the Orlando Bloom experiment, but with all those people we just listed, even Eddie Redmayne, I've seen a couple things where I'm just like, yeah, okay. That's good. That's fine. And with Orlando Bloom, we always got Elizabethtown,
Yep.
but with like Sam Worthington, and again, I got to be completely honest, sitting in my apartment in college in 2010, watching the Academy Awards when fucking Avatar was nominated for everything, and just seeing him sitting in the crowd with his sunglasses on, watching, and just total, I'm so above this, when Alec Baldwin and Steve Martin were doing their monologue, that I don't know what he can do to recover from that. Like, it's going to take some Mickey Rourke in The Wrestler level performance for me to like say, okay, you can come back. You can come to the house again and watch TV. But he's just kind of dead behind the eyes. And I'd be curious to know his whole story. If it's like this was his dream his whole life to be an actor, or if he's just one of those people. I mean, he's a good looking cat. If he just kind of fell into it through just a series of, happenstance, as we say. According to his Wikipedia page, he went to the John Curtin College of Arts and specialized in dramatic arts and studied drama. Okay, well, apparently he was into it. He did not graduate. It's just everything he says, and even in this movie, where I don't know, with the exception of David Wenham, I don't think I knew a single soul in this.
Well, you knew Timothy Spall. I mean, you didn't know that you knew him.
Yeah. So with that being said, two other people in this movie I had prior knowledge of, and that's where I know Timothy Spall from is Vanilla Sky. I was trying to figure out what movie I know him from, but that's it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he's in Vanilla Sky.
So we figured it out. But that being said, in a movie where Sam Worthington is, to me, the star, because I just know him from the shit he's done or did 10 years ago, and have little to no knowledge of everyone else in the movie dwarfed him, like from an acting perspective. Like David Wenham is great. The lady who plays Annie,
yeah, she's really
young
good.
Lady, Freya Stafford is her name. She's great. And it gets to a point where if he is going to just be the Clash of the Titans guy, cool. If you're just going to be the Avatar guy or the Terminator guy, I don't particularly care for you, but that's why I said in Terminator is perfect, because he's like a robot, even though he's not, and all that bullshit. But just looking at his damn IMDb page, Avatar 2, 3, 4, 5, Jake Sully. Jake Sully will return in Avatar 4. Suck my ass. Like, I want to see Hacksaw Ridge. Again, I think it's funny that that's like the highest profile movie he's done since, I don't know, one of those Clash movies, and it's a movie that inherently comes along with some controversy because Mel Gibson's attached. I'd be curious to talk to people specifically from this movie and what he was like to work with, and then what he became to work with after he, was Terminator or Avatar.
What if he had a black eye at the Oscars, and that's why he was wearing the sunglasses?
It would have been cooler if he didn't cover up his black eye. The
Academy's not going to let him get away with that.
They're, the industry that I have chosen to dedicate a huge chunk of my life to, professional wrestling, is riddled with the absolute worst people that have like the spottiest histories of life, and even into the realm of crime, that I just kind of push aside. And I'm just like, yeah, but they had a great match with Sheamus on Raw this week. That's what I want to talk about. And then with Sam Worthington, he's done nothing to me. and probably is an all right guy. But because I saw a 3-second shot of him on an award show 12 years ago wearing sunglasses, I forever am just bitter towards him. But I tried to put that aside from this, and I know we were talking about it in the first portion from a perspective of being satirical. I just don't believe him. I don't, I said that I kind of feel like he doesn't want to be there in anything I've seen him in. And a line you like to use, and we talked about on our Snowpiercer episode, is it's a lot to ask of somebody. This movie isn't inherently too much to ask of any of its players, but I really felt like for what it is and some of the individual performances, there were people in this that rose to the occasion of a good to great performance, and just kind of seemed like his presence comes across as, you are lucky to be watching me, or you are lucky to be on screen with me. And that's kind of my thought on Sam Worthington.
See, I don't see it that way, I don't perceive it that way, but I don't like him either way. Like in this movie, like I said, I've defended him. I think he's fine in Salvation. I think he's fine in Avatar. Like, he hasn't blown me away in either of those movies. I don't remember Clash of the Titans, and I never watched the sequel. I haven't
seen either of them.
I mean, I thought Hacksaw Ridge was great, and I remember liking him in it. But it's a small part, and I think it's just more, he's not carrying the movie. He's just in there as a supporting player, and I remember liking him and Vince Vaughn. Here, though, it's the first time that I've actually found him boring. Like, he was just bland. I mean, of course, it's a performance, but I think it was the first time that I felt it was the actor. And of course, we're talking about like Sam Worthington all these years ago. But it felt to me like whatever screen persona he has developed since, he didn't have it then. That's how I felt watching it. I was like, man, it looks like they got him pretty green. And, because his character does so little. He's, like I said in Contrarians Corner, they mostly paint him as this good guy. Even though he's, he went to prison for allegedly killing someone, and he was involved in shady business with shady people. But he comes out as kind of a Boy Scout no matter what. And
yeah, that's like a huge thing I had, because I was just referencing The Town, and like Jeremy Renner in that movie. Yeah, that motherfucker's like hardened. And this, one of the things I made reference to in the first portion in Contrarians Corner was Boy Scout is a perfect choice of words, because I understand the idea of you're trying to do good now that you're on the outside, but his character is written and portrayed like, I've got this friend that I kind of help do crime, but I'm like this compass, and I lead you towards the motherland, and I lead you into the light, and I am this beacon of hope. And then in the last 2 minutes of the movie, he just becomes this trash talking badass all of a sudden again, and it's fuck off.
I didn't feel the movie helped him, and then because the movie was giving him so little to do, I think that you needed somebody with a lot more charisma, like a stronger persona, somebody that can just, even with so little to do, could still captivate you and make you miss him, like you say, like, make you miss him when he's not on screen. But here, that wasn't the case. I just, I didn't really care. To be fair, I didn't care for many of the people in this movie, not to the extent that I didn't care like when I was watching Jason Takes Manhattan, right? Watching Jason Takes Manhattan, I was like actively rooting against them. Here, it was more like, Worthington was boring. David Wenham, I did, like I said in Contrarians Corner, like I found him just too much. It was just relentless clowning. And I liked, oh God, I forgot his name, Timothy Spall. I like Timothy Spall. I think it was weird that the movie devoted so much time to him. It felt weird to me watching it. I think that if I watched it again, that wouldn't be the case anymore, because I would know what I was getting into. But it made me feel like I wish that the movie had 100% being about his character, and then everybody else had actually being a proper supporting story, and it was just about this guy with the restaurant and the past and trying to move forward. I think maybe because his story was the most relatable, even though I've never started a business with fraudulent money or anything, but I was like, I totally get this guy, like he said, I paid my dues, I paid my, I did the time. And then what I did with the money is none of your business, except that it is, the government's business. So I think that this is partly on me, that I went into the movie expecting kind of like a quirky crime, drama, and that's not really what I got. But it took me a long time to catch up to like realize that we were really not getting that. Like I said in Contrarians Corner, when after that opening with the Spit getting shot, I really thought it was going to be a lot more Reservoir Dogs, and instead it was more of a, I don't know, I don't even know what to compare it to. It's just like this very like, I don't want to say low stakes, but there's not a whole lot of
There is no sense of urgency at any point in this movie.
Yeah. There's a lot of people just talking about the plot and explaining to you like the machinations and how like tracking the money and explaining who owes who what and why they can't trust this person and all that stuff. And it's like, I didn't care enough to follow, and I never got as lost as I pretended I was in Contrarians Corner. But there was a point in the movie where I was like, where they were still explaining stuff, and I'm like, I know this, but I don't care, and it's so much effort to pay attention. So I was like ready for it to like just get to the heist and at least, we'll switch gears and be doing something else. So I think that kind of hurt the movie as well. I imagine a rewatch would help me get through some of these issues, knowing what to expect. There's certainly something to be said for going back-row blind into this one and being kind of misled by the opening of the movie, and I guess what little I knew of it. What did you know going in, Alex? You knew that it was Sam Worthington, and you know that Chaz liked it.
Even that was about the extent of it. I didn't even like read up on it. I read up on it like about halfway through the movie. I found what I could in terms of things to reference for this podcast, which again is very minimal. But I was just like, let's just go into this and see what happens. And you can't make a movie like this, especially in 2003, and not expect to be compared to Snatch or something like that, because it's the way it's going to be, or the Ocean's movie at the time, because it just seems like that type of movie. And there's nothing wrong with making something in that vein. That's the American, the global movie industry. It just comes in waves of what's popular. I'm still waiting for this superhero shit to die down, but it's you got to put your own spin on it, man. If you want to make something that endures and something that people like you and I don't watch 20 years later and be like, nah. It's the sense of urgency thing, like I said, and comparing it to Snatch, because it's within the same 3 or 4 years of Snatch, was the climax of Snatch is like, oh my God, what the fuck's going to happen? This is crazy. And, Brad Pitt, what's he going to do? He's going to get killed. And then with this, it's just kind of like, okay, what are they doing? All right. So they're not doing that. All right. Well, I guess that's a happy ending. Yeah, I don't want to be too harsh on it, because we let off with the negatives, and I think the most negative thing of it, as I can say, is it's unremarkable, in my opinion. And the Sam Worthington thing wasn't eased at all by this, and it just felt like something I'd seen a bunch before, but just kind of even a little bit tamer. I'm curious if there's any different types of regulations about. In America, you just say and do whatever you want in a movie, and then, because there wasn't much violence to really speak of in this, which may have been completely by design. So with that being said, Julio, let's try to point out some positives. And we both were very complimentary of the Darren Barrington character, Timothy Spall, both aesthetically and, audibly. One of the finer points in the movie, and someone, like you said, whose story is hilariously relatable. And so, like, in the end, when he got out, I was happy for his character that he, succeeded in the end. That was cool. And then I really, at one point in this movie, had wished that David Wenham had been the lead. I understand it's hard to do in a movie like this where you make the heroin addict, like, the lead, the protagonist, and then had Barry as, like, the background character. Because to me, it felt like there were more interesting aspects to the Spiteri character than there were to Barry's. Like, the cooking thing never paid off. I don't give a shit. And like that weird side plot where it looked like Barry was going to bang Darren's wife, and that didn't happen. But Spiteri had like the whole, he was getting tied up with everyone and, screwing things up with both Darren and Chica, and then got involved with the CIC. So here's a big one. That whole deposition scene with him, that was presented and written like he was the main character of the movie, because then they spent like this long chunk of time on him covering that. and it was distracting to the point of like, okay, well, what does this have to do with Barry? Like, I understand it all paid off in the end, but this movie, it really felt like it wanted to be a Ocean's, Snatch, whatever. Those movies where it's 4 or 5 plots that come into one big Smoking Aces, perfect reference you made earlier. They all pay off in the end, but it couldn't help itself from focusing mainly on Barry, so that the parts where it did become about something else, it was kind of disorienting to you as a viewer. It's like, okay, how much attention am I supposed to be paying to this? Because Barry's not involved.
Yeah, I had a similar feeling whenever we had long sequences involving Spit. And that one in particular, yeah, the one where he's, the deposition, because I was like, why are we spending so much time with him? Especially because I felt, and see, I enjoyed the character less than you did. So to me, I'm like, I get the joke. I was like, I get it. He is, even though he's an idiot, he is outsmarting these guys. And it seems like he's doing it even accidentally, like in spite of himself. But to me, that's just like a one scene joke, and then you move on, and it's like we kept coming back to it. I like the payoff. I like when the guy like gives him the 20, I laughed. And then when he goes back to his wallet and he doesn't have any money, and then the other lawyer,
Yeah.
it's like, that was really funny. But I kind of wish that, you're right, I wish that this was happening to like the main character, not this glorified supporting character that I didn't really care for. But I agree, like, all those quotes that were praising that moment, that sequence, they're right. It's like on its own, separate from everything else. It's really good. I guess it was part of, when the movie's not working for you, then even the things that work on their own, it's a lot harder for them to connect. This is not like a positive, but it not necessarily a negative. This is just kind of, I was thinking about this while I was watching it. I think I even wrote it down, which is that it reminded me of Lucky Number 11. Did you ever see that?
Okay.
Josh Hartnett? Mm-mm. That was a movie that I was watching it, and I felt it even more strongly than I felt the connection between Gettin Square and whatever Guy Ritchie movie you want to pick. I remember watching Lucky Number 11 and feeling like, man, this is a big Tarantino fan that made this movie, but it doesn't have the Tarantino magic. All I could feel when I was watching Lucky Number 11 was just like some guy like really aping Tarantino and just not, like kind of like copying the homework, but not really putting the soul behind it. But I've met people, actually, I think even like our friend John Keaty, we might have had an exchange on Twitter where he was talking that he likes Lucky Number 11, so it has its fans. But to me, watching it, I could never get past that barrier of like, this is Tarantino, but not as good. And I didn't have that strong a reaction here where where the Danny Boyle thing, or not Danny Boyle, where the Guy Ritchie thing was an obstacle, but it was kind of like along the same lines of thought of like, oh, like this, but not as good as this. If I watched a Peruvian movie that was, the Peruvian version of a Guy Ritchie movie, I would flip the fuck out. Regardless of quality. And I'm not saying this to cheapen Chaz's opinion or Mel's opinion or anybody in Australia's opinion, but rather to kind of make the point that we're making earlier, which is that has to affect you on some level. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, It's like, oh, good for you. If there's something else, an extra element of the movie that allows you to enjoy it even more, even if it's something that might keep other people away. You wouldn't get anything out of seeing the Peruvian version of Pulp Fiction. I would, because I'm like, that's so weird. And I've had somewhat those experiences watching some Peruvian movies. I'm not going to say that makes automatically every Peruvian movie a winner in my book. In fact, I don't like most Peruvian movies I've seen, but whenever I've seen one where I can like trace the references very directly, it kind of like, it tickles me the right way. And even while at the same time I could like step back and go, you know what, I wouldn't call this remarkable except for the fact that it was made in Peru and it's like the Peruvian version of this, right? Like the last Peruvian movie I watched was a few months ago, and it was this sort of like dramatic thriller. And if I tell you the story, it's just your standard thriller. Mm-hmm. But then when you add to it the fact that it's happening in Peru, and some of the things that happen like have tiny tie-ins to Peruvian history, then suddenly that's like special. I don't know that they would register, for anybody that's not Peruvian, but to me, I'm like, that makes it worth watching. And I think that maybe on the same level, you could maybe translate it to something even smaller. We live in Austin, and then what happens if you watch a movie that was made in Austin and it feels very Austin? But then I've had the opposite reaction to something like that. I remember watching a comedy a few years ago. I want to say it was at the Austin Film Festival, but it was an Austin production. It was very Austin, and I hated it. But there were a lot of people in the audience that loved it for that same reason, because I'm like, oh man, that's Austin, and that's my Austin experience. And I wasn't feeling it. So I think that it could work both ways. Do you remember ever watching a movie where the fact that it was the setting was very close to you actually worked against your experience of watching it?
I don't know about that. I know there's definitely things that I'm protective of because of sentimental attachment, just be it even if it's just through proximity of location. But there's a lot of things that I think glorify Austin that annoy me, but that's in the year 2021, not always, I think. And I think one of the biggest points I want to get across before I go any further into this is, like, it's natural that, especially me, because you obviously are not from America originally, but it's like, there's no way I'm not going to come off as a xenophobic, pretentious American with, like, saying, oh yeah, I've seen it before. But let me be clear. If I could live in Australia right now instead of America, I probably would. So I want to make that clear. It's just, a byproduct of where I was raised was America, and we see so much of this shit. And another big part of that is, because of that, there's nothing that's really special to us because we get everything. So the things that I do have to hold dear to my heart and be protective of, the things that I enjoy, have to be way more niche things than film. It's going to be like some music, or of course wrestling, or fights, or, there's an example. There's this, we're coming up on the 10-year mark of this fight, Frankie Edgar and Gray Maynard, their third fight, their title fight in Houston, Texas, UFC 136. I was at that event, and I think that is like the greatest fight in UFC history. But I don't know if there's anyone else on the planet that would agree with me on that. And a huge part of it is, like, I was there, the feeling of it all, like just being able to relate so near and dear to it, really left an indelible imprint on me in relation to that. So, and kind of more in a broad sense and not just specifically applying to Chaz here, it's kind of like I talked about when you dragged me down that path of the superhero, the Marvel bullshit, the whole Black Panther thing, the Captain Marvel shit of people that for some reason get upset that historically disenfranchised races or genders are getting featured in a prominent way that they never had been before. For some reason that makes people uncomfortable, and my thought was always, good, let those people have this moment and something to cherish. Obviously, that's a much bigger overarching thing than just a movie that's specific to nationality. But that's to say that I get it. And it's like, the only reason you and I are going back and forth trashing this movie is because our opinion was asked of it. And
right. I don't resent anybody for liking Gettin Square.
No. It's just like the analogy I made with this fight that I love so much, and some of these shows I've been to in the past. It's just like, I completely get why Chaz would like this, and I think it's cool that he has a movie like this to reference when, like I said, because there really doesn't basically the way the film industry's worked in America for the past 25 years, there's really nothing that feels special or individualistic. If it is, it has to be something that, you go out of your way to see. Maybe that's why I have such like a fucking raging hard on for Good Time, because that Uncut Gems was the one that got like celebrated on a global scale, whereas Good Time still feels like it's something that I can just hold dear to my white trash heart. And so like I get the whole idea of it all.
I think there's something to be said also for the indie aspect of it. I mean, I could be wrong, but to me, this felt like an independent Australian movie, which to me is like, that makes it extra special. And it's just sometimes easier or it's more difficult to connect with that after the fact, like to factor in that context. It's like, hey, on top of that, they were not working with the resources that Guy Ritchie or any of the other filmmakers that we would compare them to, that they had. So there's also that. It's, again, it's just kind of hard to like point that out without sounding condescending. It was like, I wish I could make a movie like Gettin Square, but it's just in the end, I think that as we were talking about it, I realized that my real problem with the movie has nothing to do with how much it looks like a Guy Ritchie movie without being a Guy Ritchie movie. It's just that I don't have anything to connect to just on an emotional level. Like the closest I come to is the Timothy Spall story, but that's not the main drive of the movie. That kind of like comes and goes. And so everything else is just artifice. And it's not enough, you know.
It's a great point.
Yeah, I think that some people can connect to the artifice. I think that there's, and I know it's happened to me sometimes where like there are movies where I'm just in love with the way the story is told. And even if I don't connect to any character, just the audacity of the filmmaking is enough for me to just fall for it 100%. But that's not the case here. Like, I don't think that there's the storytelling in Gettin Square is not blowing me away. And that wouldn't matter if I was all in on at least one character and that carried me through the movie, but that doesn't happen. I would be curious to see if Chas and Mel and any other Australian listeners, like if they have a connection to a specific character that really makes
and the other 7 people in Australia.
Or if what's creating that emotional connection is the fact that it's an independent movie from Australia, and that's, you know, that kind of like it's a source of pride that also gives you that emotionality, you know, added to the experience. So I'll be curious. I think Ryan from Spit and Polish has also seen it because he mentioned that, you know, he saw that we were doing it. So I'll be curious to just see what exactly makes watching this movie extra special for them. But whatever it is, like, it's not happening for me, you know, and I know that it would be if I cared, you know, for Sam Worthington or for Spit or for, you know, or if Timothy Spall was a bigger part of the movie. But as it is, like, it's not. So I'm just not. It kind of left me cold.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty on-the-nose encapsulation of my thoughts on it as well. Just kind of a movie that just kind of happened, and I was like, okay. Not being able to relate to anything is a big part of it. And that's not necessarily exclusive to film. As with everything in life, I have, you know, a wrestling-related story to it. There's been plenty of times where I've gone to, like, independent shows and have no idea who these people are, but then the crowd, like the way they react to them, like they're fucking, you know, the second coming of Jesus just came to earth, and I'm just kind of sitting there like, all right, I guess. And then because I have really nothing to connect to with it by the end of it, I'm just like, okay, well, now I can go on the internet and say this guy sucks because I didn't get it. That's exactly what I'm going to do with Gettin Square. All right, there's the last thing to talk about. It went from making me laugh to annoying me to making me respect how many times they used Gettin Square in the movie. They used the verbiage or just used the word square. By the end of it, I was just like, goddamn right, the last thing in the movie is a postcard that said got square.
Yeah, that made me laugh. That was I had a joke that I written where I was like, "Hey Alex, do you think that the title of the movie is Gettin Square?" I couldn't figure out how to phrase it, but yeah, that's. It made me wonder if that's something like if it's something that is said as often in that set of circumstances, right? Or if it was just the filmmakers having fun with it and they're like, "Fuck it, you know, this is what it's called, and we're gonna use it as much as possible." I can't even think of a sort of like a Texan idiom that we would use that often.
Like if the movie was called Y'all or Dr. Pepper, it'd be every other word. But. In recap, or kind of my closing thought on it is, if it seemed like I was coming across negatively about it, it's really just because I was interested to have and excited to have this discussion with you, Julio, about it. I'm already starting to guess that I don't feel as negatively about it as probably some of my emotions that came across in this. It's more or less, but it's two things. It's one, just me trying to make sense of why I didn't like it, and that really helped having you to play off of. And then two, some of it is to rile up Chaz. And then I guess it's three things. And then because three, it's just Sam Worthington is a total fraud, and I feel it's my duty in many ways to just out him. As the lie, the con that he is. That being said, I mean, if this showed up on Showtime or HBO or something and I was doing nothing on a rainy day, for David Wenham's performance and just Timothy Spall, I feel it would warrant a rewatch. And then even more so, I may just rewatch this at some point to make sure that I understood the plot fully. Because like I said, I had to go back at a few points. And the Departed scene is good and was not kidding in the first portion. That like really like blew my mind. I had to pause the movie for a minute and then like go check and make sure that I remembered correctly that The Departed came out 2 years after this.
Did you like that moment? Is that the one time that you've liked a performance or a part of a performance by Sam Worthington?
Yeah, he didn't say anything. It was perfect. No, yeah, it was great. That was after he kicked that cop out of his restaurant, right? And then he caught him down the road, and that's why he beat him up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's for what it was trying to accomplish, it was perfect. And very interesting song choice. It was clear that Teplitsky, the director, Mr. Jonathan Teplitsky, it seemed to me that like he knew going into it, like that might have been the first scene that he put to paper from a visual perspective. Obviously, Neist wrote this, but you know how sometimes you see a scene in a movie that from a quality standpoint almost seems so superior to everything else in the movie. Mm-hmm. It really feels like it's the part of the movie the director had the most passionate about or whatnot. And so it really shined through in that scene. I thought that was a fine piece of business.
I agree. I actually, that was memorable. That might be like the one moment that I remember down the line because of the way it was cut too, like, you know, because it was going back and forth between that and him at the girl's apartment and all that stuff. So what's your letter grade?
I'm teetering between a C+ and a B- right now. Because again, there are parts of this that are really, I'm going to go with a C+. There's not enough good for me to warrant that above average grade, but the things I really enjoyed about it. And like I said, through this discussion, it kind of helped me flesh out more of some of the things that were making me wonder why I wasn't getting as invested and whatnot. But the things I really like. The thing I don't like, I don't, but it doesn't necessarily bog down the entire movie. So let's give this bad boy a C+.
Yeah, I'm also teetering. I'm between 2.5 stars and 3 stars. Really, I have a feeling that if I watch the movie again, it's gonna land solidly on 3 stars. This is one of those instances, and I've said it in multiple episodes before, that where I know that a rewatch would actually improve the experience, because it's one of those cases where knowing where I'm headed while watching the movie, it's just going to help. Here, watching it, I was too caught up on what I thought the movie was going to be and the fact that it was not being that movie as I was watching it.
That is a very real thing. That is something we have talked about on this podcast numerous times. A first-time viewing of you trying to make the movie something it's not can really... It's like throwing a bucket of water on a fire. It can really interfere with what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I just didn't have patience for it. I could feel myself just getting antsy and going like, all right, enough with the talking and just like, let's just get to, like, can we start the movie? You know, like, and now I know that that's not, that the movie had already started. That's what the movie was. But the other thing is, Mel mentioned it on her review, and that was that she called this a neo-noir, and, you know, it's documented in the history of the Contrarians. I'm like, noir as a genre and neo-noir too, like, it's just, I have trouble with it because of most of the time because of the convoluted plotting, and that's you know, that's the case here. Like, that it didn't help that the plot was just unnecessarily complicated for me, at least on a first watch. Not always the case, you know. I mean, patrons know that we both loved Under the Silver Lake, which is as complicated as you can get. But in this case, I think because I had, again, going back to the emotional connection, I had less of an emotional connection to the movie, so I also had less patience for its plot. So I'm going to give it 2.5 stars, fully acknowledging that it might go up. Very likely that will go up to 3 stars if I watch it again.
Chaz, I hope you don't demand a refund or anything after this. You know,
Alex, is it better than American Hustle?
I would be infinitely more inclined to revisit Gettin Square than I would American Hustle.
Well, that's something. See?
There you go. That's not even the nicest thing I can say about it, that it's better than American Hustle. I can say a lot of other nice things about it. But there's got to be a part of Chaz that knew coming into this that it may not have worked for us the same way it did for him. But got a lot of good discussion points out of it. I really, really do like the patron aspect of this when it comes to movies that I've never even heard of before. Obviously, you just mentioned Under the Silver Lake. That was awesome. And then something like this, while I don't love it as much as I'm not as crazy about it as I was Under the Silver Lake, it's still like, it's something that I would have never seen had it not been for this situation or even known about. So for that, I'm very thankful, and that's something I really enjoy about doing this. I know there's a lot of people that are inclined to, when they get that access as a patron, to recommend something to see how much fun we can have with it, a la Daddy Daycare. But this was awesome, and this is kind of my favorite aspect of it, is finding new movies and things that I don't even know about, because it's not somewhere I expected this journey of this podcast to go, because I always just expected us to find shit that is universally loved or hated and then figure out a way to make it go the other way. So that's my way of saying, while I probably didn't give this movie the review that Chaz was hoping I would, I'm appreciative that he put it on our desk, because it was covered a new area I would have never known about.
But also, I would add that it also opens the conversation, because it's it's happened before, when another patron, when Ben gave us End of Days, right? And we watched that. Oh, that was also for the patron feed. And we watched End of Days, and we were nowhere near as positive on it as he was. But then we posed a question, just like we have with Chaz now. It was but what do you like about it? And his response was illuminating. I was I still don't like it, but I totally get your point.
Yeah.
And so just knowing that at some point Chaz, will make time in his busy life to kind of shoot us a message explaining what we got wrong or what we missed about Gettin Square and what he loves about it. That's actually I find that exciting as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, look forward to it. So thank you, Chaz, for being one of our wonderful patrons. And again, thank you for bringing Gettin Square across the Contrarians desk and assigning us this homework. So, Julio, that wraps up this episode. Where are we heading next?
Next. Oh, we've been talking about that Little Women episode, and we've referenced before, it should be out by now on the patron feeds. So if you're a patron, you have that. But then, coming up in about 10 days or so, we start paying our new live stream debt. We met all our goals during our live stream for the Cure segment, which means that we have 4 M. Night Shyamalan movies to do on the show. And unlike last time, where we waited until the last possible minute to take care of those 90 sexy thrillers, this time we're knocking this out early. So what did you call it, Alex? Shyamalantology?
Shyamalantology, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we have the first of 4 M. Night Shyamalan episodes coming your way. We're going to start with the worst. We're going to start at the bottom of the barrel and climb our way.
Get it out of the way.
Yes, it's The Last Airbender, which, Alex, you haven't seen, correct?
Hell no.
Well, I've seen it. Not looking forward to it.
Why would I have seen it? Other than having to screen it, I don't know of any reason. Well, I don't know. I could potentially have dated someone at that point in time that wanted to go see it, but no. I stopped seeing Shyamalan movies after The Happening. That's when I threw in the towel.
You missed out on this. I don't know if it's going to be the same if you're not watching on the big screen, but we'll give it a shot.
Well, fingers crossed.
So that is next. Also, for those of you who like to keep up on our non-contrarians appearances, well, Alex mentioned he recorded with Gerald from Two Peas on a Podcast. I don't know when that's coming out, but whenever it does, we'll let you know. I recorded with our friends from Filmbusters. We talked about Limelight. I want to say that by the time that you listen to this episode, that Limelight episode from Filmbusters should be out. That's a Charles Chaplin movie that was very different from all the other Chaplins I've seen before. It was great. I was able to just crack open the Criterion that I hadn't watched yet and just have a good discussion with Ben, Paul, and Adam. And also, a while ago, I recorded an episode with Stu from the Stu World Order podcast. He's a big supporter of the show, and he has a podcast now that's all about superhero movies. Alex, your favorite topic. He's just he has a list of I think 200 movies, and he's just at random reviewing. He's not going in any sort of order. Just if he invites you to the show, you give him 3 numbers. He correlates those numbers to his list, and then he gives you the 3 choices, and you pick one movie. And in my case, I don't remember what my other options were, but I picked Superman 3, which I hadn't seen since I was a kid. Have you seen Christopher Reeve Supermans?
When I was a child.
Well, Superman 3 is the one that has Richard Pryor in it, which is weird, to say the least. So, gave me an excuse to rewatch Superman 3 and then have a really good discussion with Stu about it. So, check that out. I know for a fact that one's already out. Stu World Order. Again, we'll put links to Filmbusters, Two Peas in a Pod, and Stu World Order all on our show notes. So, you can check that out. Listen to more of our voices until our new episode drops.
Huge fan of you calling him Charles Chaplin.
As opposed to Charlie?
Yeah.
Chuck?
I've always known him as Charlie Chaplin, so the formality of the Charles I'm a huge fan of.
Well, my film school was called Charles Chaplin. It wasn't Charlie Chaplin, it was Charles Chaplin. I think that's where I got it from. I hadn't even realized I was doing that.
I'll take it.
It's more professional that way. Charles.
It's much more so.
Yeah. All right.
Raises our credibility greatly. People will take us much more seriously now. It wasn't the Travolta penises, it was the Charles Chaplin. That is what is in the future. That wraps up Gettin Square. Let's take it out and take it to Perennial Plugs. We want to start off, as always, with the Festive Years, who provide our opening and closing tracks. They kick us off with Last Stand, take us home with Summer of 99. Be sure to head over to thefestiveyears.com for any and all Festive Years needs.
Our friend and fellow podcaster, Hans Rothgieser, he's the man behind our logo, behind all the graphics on our Patreon page, on our website, on our upcoming merch. He's also a novelist. You can check out his work on his webpage, mildemonios.pe. That's MILDEMONIOS. You can also reach Hans on Twitter at Mildemonios, or you can email him, mildemonios@hotmail.com. If you want to talk to him about his novels, he has a bunch of zombie novels. The most recent one is an anthology of short stories written by different Peruvian authors. Each story takes place in the Peruvian region that the author is from. And he has two podcasts, Nación Combi, which is about Peruvian current affairs, and Marginal, which is about economy. Not just Peruvian economy in general. Hans is quite the Renaissance man, and it wouldn't surprise me, seeing as how he's always familiar with obscure movies, if he's actually seen Gettin Square. Whatever they called it in Spanish.
And he'll act like we're weird for having not ever heard of it up until this point.
And he'll be with Chad. He'll be like, this is a masterpiece. But thank you for all your support, Hans. It's very much appreciated.
And of course, Ms. Zoe Perez, who helps out with our social media game, helps make our Instagram account and our Facebook account very fancy and very aesthetically pleasing for you, the Contrarians fans. If you haven't already, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Contrarian Prime, and head over to facebook.com/Contrarian Prime to give us a like ski. We have some pretty cool videos that have been going up on Facebook that are exclusive to that page, so check them out. And with all those pleasantries out of the way, that completes this episode of The Contrarians. Chaz, thank you once more for bringing this to our attention and being a supporter of The Contrarians, where we are right and you are wrong, and we will catch you next time.